Good morning friends, you are most welcome to Think Ice channel. Today we are going to discuss Practicing Anthropology by MAAN IGNOU and our topic is Disaster Management. Let us begin the topic. Understanding disaster for better management. For managing disaster in a better and more effective way, it is necessary to understand the disaster situation. William Story, in his review article on the anthropological work in the field of disasters, has outlined a more important role for anthropologists in understanding the disaster situation and thus for its better management. The effective method of ethnographic fieldwork in a community or a region places an anthropologist in a position from where she or he can perform a useful function of facilitating communication between bureaucracy and the community or society. Anthropologists can act as cultural translator in Tories' words. They can communicate needs and problems of the people, which will eventually help the state machinery to prepare in a better way for future and also to undertake a more inclusive relief and recovery operation after a disaster. Tory further states that an anthropologist should relay the information between the community leaders and administrators throughout the emergency. Spilius, another scholar who talks about the role of anthropologists in a disaster situation, states that anthropologists should become an instrument for easing parties into positions permitting them collectively to solve problems. In other words, anthropologists can act as facilitators between the various stakeholders in disaster situation. The actual site of disaster is not the only place where anthropologists can do their fieldwork. There are other interesting sites where fieldwork can yield a better understanding. One such site to which Torrey points out is the behavior of complex governmental and non-governmental organizations in a disaster situation. The organizational structure of these organizations, the decision-making process during crisis, the negotiation of meaning of an event and labeling them as disaster events, all these fall well within the scope of an anthropological study. Extended field studies, not quickie questionnaire surveys, probing deep into the bureaucratic behavior observed in any disaster context, can be undertaken by anthropologist Torrey 1979. An organization can also be understood in terms of its expected role in a disaster situation and its actual achievements. An in-depth anthropological understanding can bring out the cause of any discrepancy, if it exists, between the expected role and actual achievements of an organization. This in turn will help the organizations to think over their limitations and shortcomings that will eventually lead to better disaster management. An important dimension which till now has not been fully explored by anthropologists is the impact of disasters and their management in the urban context. India is urbanizing fast. In a recently held census of 2011, it is estimated that 31% of the area comes under the urban category. Also, in the wake of increased disaster world over, urban centers are even more vulnerable than the rural ones. Also, in the wake of increased disaster world over, urban centers are even more vulnerable than the rural ones. The increased vulnerability is due to the fact that population density is more in urban areas. This means packed spaces with concrete buildings, which, if destroyed by an extreme event, can cause more collateral damage. This scenario asks for a better understanding of disaster impact in urban centers. Torrey is of the opinion that anthropologists are capable of examining the social and economic risk among hazard-prone urban population as they have been in the tribal context. Torrey 1979. This discussion leads us to the next section where we will examine the anthropological research methodology, which is the primary tool of understanding disasters and hence an aid in disaster management.